Hello Year 9, I'm Mr Major, I teach Ancient History and I'm here to talk to you about why you should definitely choose it as an option for GCSE. So what is Ancient History? It's like history, but it's older. In other words, it's history, but just before what you would learn if you were doing history. So what's so great about Ancient History? Basically, it's that the ancients get up to all sorts of crazy stuff. They are basically out of their minds. Take these guys that you'd learn about. Astyages, king of Media. He ordered a baby drowned to death after he had a bad dream about it, and when one of his closest advisors disobeyed an instruction, he killed his son, cooked him in a stew, and fed him to an advisor as a punishment before revealing the terrible truth. Cambyses, king of Persia, was so paranoid that he killed all the men in the city because they were having a party in celebration of a religious festival that he thought it was about the fact that he'd failed to conquer somewhere. And he was so incompetent that on one expedition, his men in his army ran out of food and had to start eating each other. Alexander the Great, his best friend died, so he massacred an entire village in honour of his spirit, and he led most of his army through an uncrossable desert, meaning most of them died because he wanted to prove he was better than a god. And Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, what a woman, spoke 11 languages, able to bewitch Roman leaders with some kind of strange Jedi mind tricks. These are just some of the people that you will learn about in ancient history. So what do we study in ancient history? We study the Persian Empire and Alexander the Great. We study the foundations of Rome, the city of Rome, and we study Cleopatra and her relationship with Egypt. So in year 10, we do Greece and Persia, so we do that Persian Empire and Alexander the Great. And in the Persian Empire, we look at 4 kings. So we look at Cyrus the Great, he took Persia from being a small country dominated by its larger neighbour to having a huge empire. So basically, imagine someone taking Wales and turning them into ruling all of Europe. He is also considered to have invented the concept of human rights, because the Persians generally treated the people they conquered well. Cambyses, his son, very different. Mad, bad, paranoid, murdered his sister, murdered his brother, disrespected religions. He was an all-round bad guy. Then we've got Darius the Great, a cruel tyrant, but also a very, very effective king. And Xerxes, again, another son that did not live up to the expectation of his father, pretty incompetent, and some disastrous invasions of the Greek world follow. And then Alexander the Great, fantastic character. We look at his character and his beliefs. He seemed to believe that he was a god, or possibly he just made that up so that people would think he was a god for political reasons. We look at his expeditions and how he conquered one of the largest empires the world's ever seen in just a few years. We look at significant events in his life and how he was so successful in his military campaigns. Then in year 11, we look at the foundations of Rome, so from kings to republic, so they have a revolution and they get rid of their kings and have a republic, and Cleopatra. So we look at, for Rome, we look at the legendary kings at the start, so a lot of this is about distinguishing between myth and reality. The Etruscan kings, and they become illegitimate and tyrannical, so they get overthrown. We look at the origins of the republic and all the wars and hardships that causes. And then in the final part, we look at how the poor Romans try to fight for better rights and freedoms against the kind of rich Romans that kind of ruled them. And then for Cleopatra, well, she's one of the most interesting characters in the ancient world, an incredible woman, incredibly intelligent, incredible politician. And we look at how she kind of sort of bosses around some of the Roman leaders before finally meeting a rather unfortunate end. So, what's great about ancient history in terms of how will it help you when you're older? And basically, it's exactly like history. So universities and employers love to see people with a broad range of skills, and ancient history gives that to you. It tells you some of the things on the screen, how to spot propaganda, which in the world of fake news is very, very useful. Helps you improve your writing and debating skills. It shows employers and universities that you know how to evaluate evidence and come to balanced judgments, get information from different sources, read maps, graphs, diagrams. So it shows people that you have a lot of really good skills if you're able to do well in ancient history. How is it examined? Basically, like history, your exams are all at the end of the 2 years. At the end of June, at the end of year 11, you will do a 1 hour and 45-minute exam on Greece and Persia. So that'll be 1 hour Persian Empire and 45 minutes Alexander the Great. And then the second paper will be the Roman Egypt. So again, 1 hour foundation of Rome, 45 minutes Cleopatra. Each exam is obviously 50% of your overall mark. You're basically looking for 3 things. The examiner's looking for 3 things. Knowledge and understanding, so knowing what you've studied, the content, the things that have happened, if you like. Analysing and explaining historical events to arrive at substantiated judgments. So that basically means you'll get asked the question, did the Persians treat the people they conquered well? And you're able to talk about the evidence and say whether they did or didn't. And analyse and evaluate ancient sources. So I'll come back to sources because ancient sources are kind of different from the sources you might use in history, and that's the main difference. So I'll come back to that in a second. So, things to consider before you choose ancient history. The source work is challenging, it is different. So obviously in the ancient world they didn't have photographs, they didn't have videos, so there isn't film coverage of the time or anything like that. But what you do have are some very interesting sources. Archaeological sources like inscriptions or works of art, buildings, coins and stuff like that. So this is an example of an inscription, and you'd be able to look at that and analyse that and see what that's telling you about. So you might look at that and go, who's that guy in the middle floating about? Why is the guy at the bottom right dressed as an elf? What's going on with that? And these are the kind of sources that you'll learn. What's this telling us? What's going on here? And written sources are quite interesting because the ancients like to use something called literary invention, which is a flashy way of saying made up stories. So a lot of when you're reading, you're kind of like, did this story really happen or is this person making that up? But if they have made it up, they're trying to tell you something that is true about the period of history. So it's kind of like historical fiction in a way. It's kind of like looking at the film Titanic and saying, what does that tell me about that period of history? And a lot of the ancient written sources are like that, so you're trying to do kind of a little bit of detective work. So those sources are quite challenging. Content, okay, I'll just warn you, all the content is awesome, but there is quite a lot of it, okay. Weird vocabulary. So you would have to get used to some weird vocabulary. So these are a couple of names. Ujaharesne, which I think is probably the best name I've ever heard. Ahura Mazda, Babylonians. So obviously you're talking about ancient world, so there's some unusual vocabulary that you will have to learn and potentially learn how to spell. And there is quite a lot of writing, but it's just like history in that respect. So you will have to write kind of extended pieces of writing, like essays and stuff like that. But you will have plenty of help. Obviously, I am your teacher, and Mr. Lloyd is also an ancient historian. He can help you out with anything Greek and Persia, and if we manage to get you doing A-level, then Mr. Lloyd will teach the Greek and Persian kind of side, and I will teach the Roman side of the course. Finally, you might think, well, can I do ancient history and history? I really want to do ancient history now, but I did want to do history before. Can I do both? We would recommend that you don't, just purely because if you did, say, ancient history and geography, then you might want to do geography at A-level. But can I just say, if you do history, you can still do ancient history A-level, and if you do ancient history, you can still do history A-level. So there's two subjects, they're both histories, okay, and neither one shuts the possibility of the other one down later on, all right? So in summary, why should you choose ancient history? It's awesome. Anyone can do it, all right, as long as you're committed, because as I say, there's quite a lot of content, but as long as you're committed, literally anyone can do it. It's so much fun and you'll absolutely love it. All right, so I will see you in September.